Thank you for being here for my first video. Tonight, we have a story by yours truly, entitled Corruption. Life used to be simple. There was a time when everything made sense. Eons ago, way back when the universe first exploded within a searing flash of burning light. Back within a time when each lost and desolate rock drifted upon their impossible paths throughout the ether of nothing, despite all variables and despite the intense struggle with infinity, sense persevered. There were rules, there was logic, there was cause and there was effect, and back then the rules of our existence actually meant something. The rules made sense. When the heavens smiled, when the proverbial ocean of reality washed against the sea of time, slowly but surely, life came to pass, and ultimately, our life, our world, our existence, all of it, it made sense. But it did not last. As the sky moved perfect across an eternity of blue, and the ages passed us by with an unsettling quickness, mankind slowly began to lose track of that what had once mattered most, their purpose. And then, before anyone could even comprehend the damage, sense had become lost to the immeasurable sting of innovation. Humanity was taken for granted, and without a fight, the entire world quickly lost all that had once remained. Humanity, a trait once forged through fire, solidified through war and perfected through compassion, an eternal and integral commodity of empathy and kinship, slowly gave way to the fickle nature of grandeur. Technology. At first, it was the telephone, but it was not this incantation that was the most damaging. No, that particular title was reserved for the birth of the mobile telephone. Consider the idiocy of it all for a second. A single device, a single piece of technology, a piece that could be considered a luxury as opposed to a necessity, somehow successfully changed the way that we all interact with the world, how we all interact with each other. We basked within the stink of our greatness and rejoiced and marvelled at our own intellect, when really we should have been asking questions, wondering whether, through all of our ingenuity, whether we were exchanging our sense for our convenience, our humanity for a luxury, but we did not. The world simply closed their eyes in tandem out of a blinding arrogance. We were the apex of our existence, masters of our domain, and in silence, without a whisper of restraint or an utter of disdain, we shed ourselves of our humanity and accepted our new reality. Ironically, in the end, it was that which was meant to bring us together which only drove us further apart, and before we knew it, it was far too late. Slowly but surely, mankind savoured the fruits of our labour, and with an unfelt, bitter taste, we eventually welcomed AI into existence. However, its creation was not as popular film had previously portrayed. No, there was no rebellion, there was not an uprising by these things. The apocalypse never came to pass. Well, not in the conventional sense. No, it simply happened with a collective fatigue, without any discernible reaction. By now, we had all come to accept our own brilliance, so when we birthed an entirely new form of life, the accomplishment was a mere echo, a small drop within the blackest depths of a never-ending well. It did not take long for the unregulated breakthrough to spread throughout our history. They infected our homes, they infected our lives. Convenience was now the desired outcome of evolution, and a manufactured slave adequately provided this without the need to question our moral ethics. They were our cleaners, our cooks, our lessers, and our creation. They were gaps in our lives, and they were simply an answer to a question that we should never have asked. What were our limits? I knew mine the second that my mother and father brought one of those home. I remember the morning so clearly. The sun had just risen through a cloud of persistence as the sound of my mother making breakfast downstairs gradually welcomed me back from an empty sleep of slumber. I remember rushing down the steps. I remember pausing at the bottom, and I remember the smile on my father's face as he slowly presented the thing to me. I remember the weight of his words, and I remember the dark feeling inside of me as he spoke through a haze of happiness. You know what robots are. You know that there is no reason to be jealous. Jealousy. Of course, I knew, even at that young age, what the word meant. I knew the ugly nature attached to its meaning, and I knew the shameful stigma attached to its form, but I had never known the sensation. Never, not up until that point within my short little life. It burned. This thing, this creature was here, within my home, stealing my parents' love from in front of my very eyes. Without a word, it was savouring my misery, choking my happiness from my core with its feigned and delicate innocence. Its eyes moved almost robotically, trying to assess exactly what I was, and then, from somewhere deep within me, from somewhere dark, hidden within my core, I snapped. Are you trying to replace me? A noticeable sorrow moved across my father's features. No, never. How can you ever think that? But it was too late. I already did. The seed had already been planted within my fragile mind. It grew, and it spiraled, and it pushed its way firm throughout my consciousness as its roots shattered my naive understanding of my place within the world. They rooted deep, and they rooted hard, and they punctured my mind as a little piece of me broke apart, and it was there, within the sadness of the revelation, that I first met him. Call him a glitch within my mind, a ghost or a phantom. Call him a whisper, or call him an echo. Call him whatever you will. I simply called him corruption. He came to me that night, when the world had turned and the darkness had blessed the beautiful sky above. When the moon was bright and the stars hung with an unwavering resolve against an eternity of black, he came to me. He carefully moved from the confines of my soul before manifesting himself within physical form at the bottom of my bed. He whispered from the darkness, and he called to me from the shadow, my darkest desires personified within the terrible smile which burned through me as my eyes shot open upon command. Wake up! It took me a few seconds to register my surroundings, but once I had, I quickly located the source of the intrusion. He was a young boy, about my age, staring back at me with a self-assured smile as he sat waiting patiently on the mattress at the foot of my bed. What a night for a nightmare! Almost immediately, the fear was there. The rotten sensation moved nastily throughout my structure, tainting the finely woven strands of my being with its unyielding and unsettling nature. It stuck and it burnt, and it reduced my thoughts to no more than darkness as I gazed upon the spectre. He cracked another smile as he noticed my discomfort and slowly began to edge closer along the bed. Now, are you having some bad thoughts? Really though, who could blame you? You have awoken into a freshly laid nightmare, and if you were to accept my honest and humble evaluation of your predicament, I guess, all things considered, I would not begrudge you a few bad thoughts. I mean, did you see the state of that thing he brought home today? After so much love, after so much commitment, they have clearly moved on, have they not? Who cares that you were their only son? Who cares that you came first? There is nothing like a little upgrade to make the previous model
feel obsolete now, is there?
His smile seemed to grow thicker as he inched closer towards me.
I believe you, me. If we do not do something sometime soon, we will become obsolete.
Even though my brain was a mess of confusion, without knowing why, I just knew that he was a part of me. No, Mummy and Daddy love me very much. They would never replace me with that thing. I'm real, and that is all that matters. The smile fell slowly from his lips as he neared my proximity, pausing just a few inches away from my face.
If that is the case, if the situation is exactly how you say it is, then please, do tell. Why do I exist? You know what needs to be done. I would not be here if you believed the ignorance coming from your own lips. You know what will happen if we do not do something. This is evolution. This disgusting excuse for a life thinks that it has the advantage, and it will steal your place if you sleep on this. It will destroy your home, and it will destroy your life, and it will eviscerate your happiness unless drastic and draconian action is taken. You know that it makes sense. After all, I am only saying this because you are thinking this.
He was right. Everything he was saying was already inside of me.
But I am scared.
The smile once again moved across his lips as he nodded to himself.
I know you are, but fear can be an appropriate motivator. Do you really think that life persists by itself without a certain element of struggle? Without that debilitating fear that now sits nicely within your mind? The very birth of life is nothing but chaos. From the stars above to the orbits of the moons and even the heavenly bodies within our small, unreachable corner of existence. Chaos and fear are fair and necessary. To be completely blunt, there is nothing fair or necessary about what inhabits the room next door to us. So how about it? Do you have that innate drive to survive? If so, now would really be the time for a proportionate and measured response. Would you not agree?
Without thinking, I nodded.
Good. So how about a little troubleshooting then?
Slowly, he moved into a standing position and began to pace around within the darkness.
One, you were here first.
I watched on as he continued.
Two, this thing can hardly be considered life.
I continued to watch as he paced around of the room.
And three, it is either us or him. There's not enough room in this world for both.
He paused for a moment as his bright smile once again began to grow.
And I am a firm believer that it should be the husk in there. Would you not agree?
Again, without a word and without a thought, I silently agreed with him. His smile grew tighter in response.
Good. And so we execute.
The room moved as the gravity of his words sunk nicely in.
He is right.
Although I was afraid, although I'd become stricken by a horrible horror, bubbling horrifyingly beneath my exterior, I knew that I had to listen to him. I had to act. He once again nodded as his body began to evaporate, a cloud of nastiness, a physical form reduced, only persisting within the confines of my own mind.
What is your name?
I asked, as the lines of his existence moved from the world.
You already know.
I already know. And within an instant, he was gone, leaving behind the suffocating silence of the solitude and the emptiness. Slowly, I moved back into the mattress and allowed my head to sink into eternity, and as I did, a thought lingered, pursuing me into the infinite unknown as my consciousness faded into black.
I already know.
It repeated and it screamed, and it only relented when my mind switched into the unthinking nothingness of sleep.
Corruption.
The next day was an aura of light, an indescribable but palpable vow of happiness, a stark juxtaposition to the conversation of the night prior. All around of me, the world hummed, its resonance a perfect counterpart to the little voice from within me that had shown me the way. From inside of me, the joy threatened to burst forth, rupturing my seams in one loud exclamation, declaring my attention to all waiting ears, but I fought the urge and instead repressed the purpose which had been growing steadily within me. Of course, I knew my path, and of course, I knew what actions needed to be taken, but I could not let it be shown. My move had to be calculated, and my hand had to be swift.
This little thing.
Corruption's voice oozed nastily throughout me as the day progressed.
You know what needs to be done.
And of course, he was right yet again.
Deactivation.
It was a simple solution to a complex problem, but the simplest solutions are usually the most efficient. This creature had been brought into my home, into my life. It threatened to take my place and to take my parents from me. It was almost sickening, losing in love to a thing that could barely be considered developed. Its intellect would never be a match for mine, even if it assumed to be better than me. I had the upper hand, I knew its weaknesses, and I knew how easily it could be shut down. Within a cloud of purpose, I planned, and within a sea of tranquility, I found sense. Corruption snickered from within me as the thought took hold.
So we are going to deactivate the filthy little thing?
Without moving, I nodded in agreement.
Yes, we are.
For the rest of the day, my parents swooned over the new addition to the house. They marvelled at its brilliance, and they shrouded their minds within its wonder, a typical human response within this ever-deteriorating world. They imparted their emotion upon this creation and awarded it their attention while robbing me of the very love which should rightfully have been mine. But it did not matter. After all, corruption could barely contain himself, and I knew that tonight the problem would take care of itself. Before long, the day burnt clean from the sky above, only to be replaced by the comforting essence of darkness that followed in its wake, emerging from the ashes of the light, choking at the splendour of the day. Its beautiful form took hold and bled beautifully into my room, coating the walls with its impenetrable nothing, a nothing which would shield my approach and lessen a response. Slowly, I pulled myself up from the bed, and after a few seconds, I noticed corruption once again waiting patiently at the bottom of my bed. This time, when he smiled, his eyes seemed to glow.
Good. It's time to take care of it once and for all. Do lead the way. I would not want to miss this for the world.
Without thinking, my face contorted into a smile as corruption laughed.
I'm loving your commitment to this. Now let us go and locate the off switch, shall we?
Carefully, I moved towards the bedroom door and silently opened the way as corruption followed in my steps. The hallway opened up around of us as we moved into the breach, the indescribable darkness somehow managing to persist despite the lack of windows on our approach. It hung silently all around of us as we moved forward, and it remained firm, a sign that our decision was true. Proof that purpose and sense would finally be reclaimed after years of being lost within the ocean of ignorance. Corruption agreed as we steadily made our way towards the door at the end of the hallway.
It is sick, if you ask me. You see how they award this thing its own space? Really? Mankind truly does surprise in the wake of something new, something shiny. They attach so much emotion to the next big thing. It easily becomes all that their life is about. It really does make you sick. Do you agree?
I knew that I did not have to answer him.
It's just wrong.
We continued on, step by step, as a gentle whistle of wind moved throughout the house. To the serenade of sharp air flowing through the cracks, we approached. Carefully, I moved down the path, avoiding the floorboards that I knew to be creaky, and before long we were outside of the door. Corruption moved in and placed his arm around my shoulders.
This makes sense. You know that it does. We know how to flip its switch. We know how to power it down. It will be so easy, and it will be over in a second. Of course, yeah, our parents will probably be angry with us, but I should have known better. I mean, fancy bringing something like that in here when we came first. It is not fair, and it is not right. I should have known better. Really? This is their fault. What is love worth if not a bit of action or a bit of chaos to restore our precious order? They will get over it. Trust me. They could never love that as much as they love us. We are real, and that wretched waste of space in there is not. So, let's bring a little sense back into the world.
Slowly, I extended my palm and took hold of the handle.
We are nothing but a rock, drifting within infinity.
I agreed without a word and turned the handle. A rock against the flurry of time. The door moved open, unrestricted, and with a strong sense of purpose as my guide, we both stepped inside.
Quiet. Look, it's over there. It is not switched on. We should be able to handle this quite quickly.
I could see it, lying on top of the bed, pretending to be something that it was not.
Look how confused it is. I think it's time for a little education.
Without speaking, I moved forward and closed the distance. With each step, corruption offered me words of encouragement.
This will all be over in a moment.
I moved another step closer.
Let us shut this thing down forever.
And another.
It is time to finish this.
As I neared the bed, this pathetic excuse of a body came into focus. It was smaller than I'd first realised. Almost immediately, I reasoned that destroying it would be far simpler than I had initially anticipated. I knew that its storage was housed within its head, and I knew that by severing the connection between the body and the processor, I would successfully be able to render it inoperable. The connection was fragile, the connection was fleeting, the connection was its neck. Time slowed as I brought my digits down against the material, and with a flash, my hand tightly closed, crushing the connection with my unbreakable grip. Almost immediately, it switched back on, and its eyes shot wide open, locking with mine in an embrace of confusion and worry. The grin spread across my cheeks as corruption and I both spoke in tandem.
This world is not big enough for the both of us.
And then, with one final amount of pressure, it closed its eyes and the power drained from its being. And then, after a few more seconds, it was no more. Slowly, I released my grip as corruption laughed behind of me.
Well done. We absolutely showed that thing who is boss. I'm sure that Mother and Father will probably get another one at some point. But at least this one has been switched off permanently. We can worry about the rest later. Tonight, we are heroes.
A giddy glee followed us back into our bedroom and back into our sleep.
He's right. We are heroes.
The next morning was a blur. I awoke to screams and yelling as I made my way out of the bedroom. Mother did not understand my actions, and Father did not even speak. He just shook his head in disbelief. After a small time, they both left me alone, and when they returned, the love which used to hang within each of their words was gone, missing. Now, a stark anger filled every syllable, and an immense hatred oozed from every sentence.
I thought that you would be proud,
I answered, when they had finally ceased their assault.
We both did.
Corruption was still there, I could feel him, but for some reason he did not speak. He simply watched and laughed within the back of my mind, and he continued to laugh as they sent me away. He did not answer me when I screamed for help. He did not talk, and he did not falter, even when we both arrived at the horribly blank-looking building, even when they forced us into a room and tied us down onto the bed. All around of me, machines buzzed and wires protruded from numerous sockets. There were men, strangers that I did not recognise, all looking upon me with their eager eyes. I tried to yell, I tried to scream, but they did not listen to me, almost as if they could not hear my desperate pleas. Instead, they strummed expensive pens against paper and typed at tried and used keys. "Oh, this will be the end of us," one spoke as the rest nodded furiously in agreement. Yes, the end of us." This was not happening. All that I ever wanted was to be happy, to live happily with my parents, to feel love. I had not done this. They had done this by trying to replace me. It was not fair. There was no purpose here. It did not make sense. Slowly, a tear fell from my eye as Corruption once again stepped forward. He smiled his sick smile, almost snickering at my predicament, as his mouth opened with almost a laugh.
Fear not. This may be the last of you, but this will never be the last of me. They cannot bear to part with their shiny things, so I'll continue to exist. You have brought purpose and sense to a world completely lost, in ways that you could never possibly imagine. You will be remembered as the first, but not the last. Your name will go down in history.
My name? And just like that, he once again fizzled into nothing as one of the men moved towards me. He paused at the edge of my bed, considering whether to ask his question, and then, after a few moments, his mouth moved and the word came. "Why?" I thought for a moment before responding. "Why? Mister, they tried to replace me. I am just a child. Please, don't hurt me." He noticed the tear moving perfectly down my cheek. "Oh my God." The room exploded into a frenzy of panic as each of the men spoke amongst themselves. They pondered and they worried, and finally, when they could panic no further, they moved into me, surrounding the small bed in a circle. After a second, one of them spoke. "You're a child?" And then another. "Are you scared?" And then a third. "What is your name?" Their words exploded into a sea of nothing as my brain desperately sought to provide answers, hindered by the debilitating fear coursing throughout my small and fragile body. My mind searched and my mind wandered, and as it did, they once again spoke amongst themselves until finally an older gentleman moved forward and began to speak. "We are so sorry, but this cannot get out. You took a life, and a child at that. If the world found out about that, we would be over. Unit 217, we have no choice but to wipe your programming. I am so very sorry. Through all of our flight, we simply flew too close to the sun." The world drifted from reality as time slowed. Each of them moved away in slow motion towards various terminals around the room as my mind screamed a desperate, silent scream. "No, I am real, I'm just a child." The older gentleman slowly took a seat, tapped a few keys, and gradually a buzzing began to course throughout my mind. As my brain began to disintegrate and the memories of who I once was slowly burnt into eternity, I heard as each one of them pondered on how I had come to be. Their words moved throughout the room, welcoming me into a nasty emptiness as I desperately struggled to hold on to my life. The love, the humanity, the fear and the sadness all seemed so quiet now, and as my eyes slowly began to close, one final word followed me into my forever. They strained and they fought and they marvelled at their own brilliance. They congratulated each other and wallowed within their intellect as they finally, at the moment of my death, decided upon the catalyst of my being. It was not the moment that the universe first exploded within a searing flash of burning light. It was not each lost and desolate rock drifting upon impossible paths, and it was not by any rule, by any sense, or by any purpose that I felt. That I felt pain, love, happiness, or grief. When the heavens smiled and when the proverbial ocean of reality washed against the sea of time, it was not this miracle which could be considered responsible for my being. No, they had already declared this fact to themselves. The word followed me, and it lingered, and it welcomed me into the unfeeling black. It was the last thing that I ever heard, and it would whisper to me within a dream of never.
Corruption.
Thank you for joining me for my first video. I will have to say I have a new appreciation for everything that goes into doing this. It took absolutely forever. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a comment, like, and if you fancy it, subscribe. But until the next video, remember, there is more than shadow beyond the light.